To failover Azure SQL Managed Identity, follow these steps. First, understand what Azure SQL Managed Identity is. It is a feature that allows Azure services to authenticate to Azure SQL database without needing to store credentials in code. Next, ensure you have the necessary prerequisites in place. You need an Azure subscription, an Azure SQL database, and a managed identity enabled for your Azure service. Now, let's move on to the steps to failover Azure SQL Managed Identity. Step 1. Configure the managed identity for your Azure service. This can be done through the Azure portal or using Azure CLI. For example, if you are using Azure CLI, you can use the command to enable the managed identity for your Azure service. Step 2. Grant the necessary permissions to the managed identity. This can be done by assigning the correct role to the managed identity in Azure Active Directory. For instance, you can assign the SQL DB contributor role to the managed identity. Step 3. Test the failover by disconnecting the primary connection and verifying that the managed identity can still connect to the Azure SQL database. You can do this by using a tool like SQL Server Management Studio or Azure Data Studio. Step 4. Monitor the failover process and verify that the managed identity is working as expected. You can use Azure Monitor to track the performance of your Azure SQL database and the managed identity. Best practices to keep in mind when failing over Azure SQL Managed Identity include ensuring that you have the correct permissions in place, testing the failover regularly, and monitoring the performance of your Azure SQL database. By following these steps and best practices, you can ensure a successful failover of Azure SQL Managed Identity. In conclusion, failing over Azure SQL Managed Identity requires careful planning and execution. By understanding the key concepts, following the steps outlined in this guide, and implementing best practices, you can ensure that your Azure SQL database remains available and secure even in the event of a failover.